They told us we were the last ones in the galaxy to crawl out of the mud. They watched us through cloaked satellites, through observation drones shaped like comets, through biohacked probes that embedded in our oceans and deserts. For centuries, the so-called Galactic Council saw Earth as a backwater curiosity, something to laugh at while sipping the blood wine of conquered races. They called us feral sapiens. But the truth is, we were just late. Not stupid, not weak, just waiting, biding time. And when we finally launched our first interstellar drive, they descended like vultures. No welcome, no alliance, just a broadcast. Surrender your technology and population for evaluation. Resistance will be met with cleansing. That was their first mistake. My name doesn't matter. Names died in the pits. What mattered was what I became, what we all became after the scorching. The scorching was what they called it, a test, a warning. They glassed half of Europe, most of Australia, and dropped a kinetic rod on Detroit that left a crater wider than Lake Superior. No nukes, just pure gravity. They didn't even send soldiers. They thought we'd break. Instead, we went silent. No news, no retaliation, just quiet. The kind that comes before the gunshot. For 7 years, Earth became a forge. We tore apart everything, factories, satellites, deep bunkers, and started building under the ice, in the volcanic caves, and inside the bones of old megacities. No governments. Just one word, spoken in low voices. Vengeance. I was recruited in the Arctic. Not enlisted. Recruited. Kidnapped, honestly. One night I was scavenging for parts in an abandoned base outside Reykjavik. Next thing I know, I'm blindfolded, gagged, thrown into the back of a freezing cold hauler with a dozen other volunteers. Some cried, others screamed. I didn't say a word. I'd already lost everything. They called it Black Forge, the facility. No sunlight, just drills, reactors, and scream metal being welded in the dark by men and women who stopped believing in happy endings. That's where we built the Railgun. Not the first of its kind, but the first of our kind. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't elegant. It was brutal, ugly, and made from the bones of fallen satellites and shredded mining rigs. But it worked. Oh, it worked. It didn't fire shells. It fired cities. Chunks of tungsten the size of submarines accelerated to a fraction of light speed. When it hit, it didn't explode. It evaporated. Atmosphere, rock, steel, gone. And we only needed one shot. The galaxy's rulers were 12 species, each more arrogant than the last. Bioengineered perfection. They lived for centuries, feeding off slave labor and conquered resources. Their capital was called Aurelius Prime, and it made Earth look like a compost heap. That's where we aimed. They thought we couldn't find it. We did. They thought we couldn't reach it. We did. They thought we wouldn't dare. We did. I remember the silence in the control chamber. A single red button. No countdown. No ceremony. Just me and the engineers standing in the cold light of the chamber, watching as the payload aligned. One of them whispered, "You sure about this?" I said nothing. I pressed the button, and somewhere across the stars, a city burned. The impact shattered Aurelius Prime's moon. A fragment the size of Manhattan plunged through their planetary shield. The shockwave killed 5 of the 12 rulers in the first hour. By the 3rd hour, food riots broke out. By the 6th, their AI defense grids turned on their own citizens, mistaking them for infiltrators. By the next rotation, the galactic crown fell. That was just the beginning. Now they know what we are. We are not peaceful. We are not tame. We are not another species to catalog and cleanse. We are human, and we're just getting started. They didn't think we'd do it. That was the root of their failure. Aurelius Prime wasn't just a capital. It was a symbol, a throne of ivory and glass, where the 12 species sat in judgment over the rest of the galaxy. untouchable, immaculate. Preserved by centuries of conquest and held together by fear. And then we blew a hole through it the size of a goddamn continent. Their pride cracked before their defenses did. The railgun didn't just tear apart their moon, it tore open the illusion of invincibility. For the first time in 10,000 years, the ruling species of the galaxy bled. And they responded exactly how tyrants always do, with panic disguised as rage. I was deep inside the Blackforge installation when the retaliation came. They didn't bother sending diplomats. No negotiation, no inquiry, just annihilation fleets, planet killers, gravity-warp torpedoes, atmosphere strippers, ships bigger than mountains, moving like ghosts. The warning came 30 minutes before contact. A burst transmission through ancient VLF frequencies because their jammers couldn't block low-tech. That was one of our tricks. Where they evolved forward, we dived backward. Analog, dirty, physical. Things they no longer even considered threats. Fleet inbound. ETA 34 minutes. Multiple capital-class vessels. Primary targeting, Eurasian supercontinent. That was all we got. I wasn't a soldier then, not officially. I was maintenance crew, reactor calibration. My fingers were still blistered from welding coolant coils when the sirens began to howl. Everything went red. Not just lights, the oxygen indicators, the coolant lines, the AI interfaces. Red meant one thing: surface breach expected, no evacuation, hold or die. We didn't run. We didn't even panic. There's a kind of silence that comes when death feels certain, not the chaotic kind with screaming and flailing, but the stillness of people who've already buried their families, already tasted hunger so deep it makes your gums bleed, already lost everything that ever softened them. That was the kind of silence Blackforge lived in. We didn't pray, we armed. They hit Beijing first. I watched it from the command center's external array. Beijing wasn't even a target of value anymore, just a dead city crawling with frost and shattered skyscrapers. But the Council bombed it anyway. A warning. The orbital cannon fired a single tungsten core from high atmosphere. No explosion, no light show. Just a pulse of kinetic force that flattened everything for 60 kilometers in every direction. Not a building left standing. The crater steamed in the cold. Then they moved west. Kiev, Istanbul, Munich, all gone. The feed cut out after that. The next 20 minutes were nothing but static and muffled thuds, distant tremors shaking Blackforge's foundation deep beneath the Arctic bedrock. Then silence again. Until the screaming started in Sector 4. They sent in drop units, not soldiers, not like us. These things were bio-sculpted nightmares, 8 feet tall, armor grown into their flesh, spines like razors and no eyes, just heat sensors embedded in their skulls. They didn't talk, didn't hesitate. They weren't there to secure territory, they were there to cleanse. Sector 4 was a storage division. Non-combat personnel, engineers, technicians. One of the youngest recruits, a kid named Roan, 15 maybe, was on rotation there. His voice came through the intercom, ragged and wet. "They're in the vents. They're using the heat lines. Oh God, they're fast." Then static. Then silence. We didn't have time to mourn. The base commander, a woman known only as Matron, gave one order. "We hold. If they want a war, we give them hell." I was handed a rifle that still smelled of oil and fire. Standard issue, Blackforge Reclaimer. Semi-auto with chemical propellant. No energy weapons. They could jam those. No targeting systems. They hacked those too. This was war at its dirtiest, meat and metal. The corridors were narrow, designed that way on purpose, forced choke points, kill zones, the kind of layout that meant the invaders had to crawl over their own dead to get to us. And they did. The first wave hit us within minutes. No warning, just vents exploding, steel buckling, and monsters charging through the steam. I shot the first one square in the throat. Its blood steamed as it hit the floor, burning through concrete. They didn't scream when they died. That's what unnerved me most. No pain, no rage, just pure directive. Purge, purge, purge. We held for 6 hours. The air was thick with smoke and blood. My ears were ringing from constant fire. My shoulder dislocated from recoil, and I popped it back into place between volleys. I watched a man next to me, skin burned from acid spray, keep shooting with one arm. His name was Hark. He didn't say a single word the entire fight, just growled and pulled the trigger. By hour 7, we were down to knives and pipes. That's when Sector 7 collapsed. They breached the lower generator chamber, triggered a chain reaction. Half the base folded in on itself. Matron was buried under 3 tons of steel. They never found her body. Command fell to a man named Krieg, ex-military, scarred face, eyes like broken glass. He gave a new order: we die here, or we make them wish they did. That's when Protocol Reaper was activated. Not a weapon, not a retreat, a message. The full recording of Aurelius Prime's destruction, from impact to firestorm, and alongside it, a transmission in all galactic dialects. Simple, direct, final. We gave you peace. You gave us death. Now, you'll learn what it means to fear the dark. We launched the message into every relay node across their systems. Within 22 minutes, 12 billion beings across 5 species had seen it. And everything changed. The Galactic Council was fracturing. 2 species declared neutrality. One turned on the others, hoping to spare itself. And the others, the true tyrants, they doubled down. They declared humans a class null contagion, not a species, not a civilization, a virus, to be erased. But something unexpected happened next. The outer colonies started resisting. Not Earth's colonies. We didn't have any yet. Theirs. The Council had conquered hundreds of lesser races, forced them into labor and silence. But after they saw Aurelius Prime burn, after they saw the Council panic and falter, something inside them snapped. They remembered hope, and they remembered that humans fought back. That's when the whispers began. One word passed from system to system like a wildfire in the dark. Railgun. Not a weapon, a symbol. They didn't know our faces. They didn't know our names. But they knew we fired the shot that made gods fall. And they started rising. We didn't win that battle in Blackforge. We survived it. Out of 600 stationed, 74 made it out. I was one of them. We crawled out through the lower shafts, into the open Arctic night. The sky was full of fire, debris from orbital strikes, burning clouds, the remains of enemy ships shot down by desperate surface defenses. Krieg stood beside me, bleeding from his stomach, one eye swollen shut. He looked at the night sky, and he laughed. Not a happy laugh, the kind you make when you're too broken to scream. They thought we'd die quiet, he said. They were wrong. We were evacuated by a subglacial crawler. Half frozen, packed with survivors, we drove for 9 days under the ice, feeding on protein packs and melted snow. Every hour we expected a scan drone to catch us, or the hull to give out. But we made it to Facility 9X, one of the last remaining bunkers in the Canadian Shield. They welcomed us like ghosts returning from hell. And there, we learned the truth. The Railgun strike was only the beginning. Command had built 3 more, hidden, mobile, spread across the planet in pieces. We weren't retreating. We were arming. And this time? We weren't aiming at capitals. We were aiming at their supply lines, their breeding grounds, their fuel reserves. We were going to burn the roots of their empire to ash. We didn't have numbers. We didn't have fleets. We didn't have diplomacy, allies, or faith. What we had were wounds, and the kind of clarity only pain can give. Every human that walked into Facility 9X was already dead on the inside. Blackforge had burned the weakness out of us. Whatever was left was rage wrapped in bone. And it wasn't just us. The survivors coming in from other bunkers carried the same look in their eyes, gritty, hollow, hungry for a different kind of war. We weren't just going to fight back. We were going to make them feel it. The new plan was codenamed Coffin Seed. That was the kind of poetic madness only humans could come up with, because we didn't just want vengeance. We wanted it to bloom in their homes, spread like rot in the walls of their temples. The idea was Krieg's. Capital strikes wake fear, he said, limping on a crushed leg. But starvation? Collapse? Civil rebellion? That's how you end a dynasty. And he was right. We learned something in the ruins of Blackforge, something no alien warlord had ever figured out. The Council's empire wasn't held together by honor or loyalty. It was held by control of supply. Food grown in hyperculture fields on moons, water extracted from cryo-worlds and ferried to desert colonies, FTL fuel mined from stars orbiting black holes and processed on world-sized refineries. And every last bit of it was dependent on trade lanes. We couldn't beat their fleets, but we could cripple what those fleets fed on. So we did what humans do best when the world goes dark. We became ghosts. We built the ghost ships from wreckage. They weren't pretty, but they didn't need to be. We found downed freighters, shredded council skirmishers, even a half-crushed terraformer abandoned in Antarctica. We gutted them, retrofitted them, replaced AI systems with analog controls, and carved out space for one thing: pain. Each ship carried railgun cores, scaled-down versions, not planet killers, but piercers. Designed to shoot straight through shielded hulls, leave a hole in the spine of a capital ship, and keep going, manned by volunteers. But volunteer didn't mean what it used to. These weren't heroes. There were no uniforms, no glory, just men who had lost too much to stay still. I captained one of them. We called her the Widow's Cough. Why? Because when she fired, it sounded like a dying woman choking on metal, and when her round hit, someone across the stars buried their king. Our first target was Gothriel 9, a fuel distribution hub orbiting a red giant. It was a rotating station, shaped like a spiked wheel, with a spinal dock that connected to over 60 different transport lanes, protected by 3 local patrol fleets, and more importantly, a species known as the Cryon Syndicate, 8-limbed bastards who ran most of the Council's deep space logistics. They were arrogant, rich, slavers by trade, merchants by blood. They didn't fear anything because nothing had ever touched them. Until we came. We launched with 3 other ships from suborbital platforms cloaked in ocean storms. No heat signatures, no comms, just solar sails, silent thrusters, and patience. It took 52 days to reach position. 52 days in the dark, eating paste, pissing in a filter tank, sleeping in shifts, listening to nothing but the hum of power cells and the occasional groan of the hull shifting. Halfway there, one of the volunteers cracked, started sobbing in his bunk. Not screaming, just whispering over and over, "They killed my kids! They killed my kids!" We didn't say anything. We let him cry, then handed him the trigger assembly when it was time. He was the one who fired. When we emerged from stealth at Gothriel 9, the first patrol ship didn't even recognize us. They hailed us, asking for identification codes. We didn't respond. They opened fire. Too late. The Widow's Cough released a single round. Just one. It pierced the patrol cruiser lengthwise, entered through the engines, exited through the bridge, and left a trail of frozen atmosphere and shredded limbs floating in its wake. The station spun to red alert. But the second shot had already been fired. It wasn't aimed at a ship. It was aimed at the station's heart. the reactor coupling that distributed antimatter fuel across the trade lanes. Impact velocity, 36,000 km/h. Result, total internal implosion, chain detonation across every docked vessel. Firestorms inside vacuum-sealed chambers, pressure failures, fusion cores rupturing. Within 6 minutes, Gothriel 9 was gone. Not damaged, not disabled, gone. But that wasn't the real win. The real win was what happened after. When the fuel deliveries stopped, entire colonies went dark. Ships stranded in warp corridors, civilian transports running dry near asteroid belts, military outposts forced to go silent, their energy diverted to basic life support. And more importantly, the Cryon Syndicate collapsed in 2 weeks. Their competitors turned on them, their allies withdrew, their hired fleets rebelled. Because in the Council's world, weakness is death, and humanity had just exposed a jugular vein. The Council didn't speak publicly about the attack. They censored the network, blocked all references to it. But it didn't matter. Because by now their own citizens were whispering the word, human, not savage, not virus, not anymore. Now we were myth, a myth that blew holes through gods. After Gothriel, there was no turning back. We were officially marked as universal hostiles. Any ship bearing Terran signals was to be destroyed on sight. Any colony harboring us was to be sanctioned, raided, and reduced. And yet, something strange started to happen. On the 3rd week after the attack, we intercepted a transmission from Breltor, a fringe mining colony on the edge of Council space. Encrypted in old Earth Morse code. We decrypted it in under an hour. We saw what you did. Our overlords fled. We are ready. We are armed. Give us the signal. I remember Krieg reading the message. He didn't smile. He just muttered, "Told you." We sent one word back. Wait. That was the key to the plan now. Not to rush, not to flare bright and die, to rot them from within. We began to send encoded packages through civilian channels, hidden in trade data, ship manifests, old entertainment feeds, embedded in music, in static, in the pauses between signals. And in those packages, blueprints, weapons schematics, sabotage instructions, guides to building railguns out of mining equipment. Suddenly, humanity wasn't alone anymore. We were becoming a virus in the way they feared. Not because we were mindless, but because we were everywhere. And we were angry. Back in Facility 9X, we continued to expand. Every survivor, every mechanic, every scavenger, put to work. No more civilians, no more politics, just war. We didn't believe in peace anymore. That illusion burned up in the skies over Blackforge. Now we believed in balance. They killed 1 billion? We'd kill 10. They destroyed our cities? We'd shatter their trade? They enslaved us? We'd turn their palaces into tombs. But not all humans agreed. A splinter cell formed. Former politicians, diplomats, corporate leeches who survived by hiding in bunkers while the rest of us bled. They called themselves the Preservation Pact. They believed we had gone too far, that we should sue for peace now, use our victory at Gothriel as leverage. They sent an envoy to 9X, dressed in white, carrying scrolls of terms. Krieg didn't even let him speak. He shot him in the chest in the loading bay, left the body for the rats. If they wanted peace, he said, they shouldn't have fired first. I didn't disagree. By then I had already killed 12 aliens with my own hands. Seen their blood steam in the cold, watched their ships fall. And still, every night I dreamed of my brother's body buried in the rubble of Detroit, of my mother's last voicemail before the orbital cannon hit Melbourne, of my daughter's empty crib. Peace? Peace was for the dead. We were the living, and the living wanted fire. They always thought of us as background noise, even after the strike on Aurelius Prime, after the widow's cough turned Gothriel 9 into a smear across the stars. The inner worlds of the Galactic Council still called us noise. The elites told their people we were terrorists, rogue elements, a genetic flaw in the galactic order, something to be exterminated, not reasoned with. That was fine. Let them lie. Because while their thrones shook and their fleets scrambled, we were doing something they couldn't predict. We were planting seeds. I spent 23 days on a rusted cargo hauler called the Furnace Dog, hiding in the waste compartment, eating nothing but ration paste and recycled air. The ship was headed to a mining colony called Jarquel, just outside of Council patrol zones, one of those places the rulers never visited, but bled dry all the same. Jarquel wasn't human. They were a species called the Quandori, thin-boned, six-limbed, skin like polished stone, treated like beasts of burden, worked to death harvesting crystallized energy cores used in Council starships. You wouldn't know it to look at them, but the Quandori had heard of us. The moment I stepped out of the cargo hold, covered in filth, my railgun core wrapped in foam and hell, I thought I was going to be killed. Instead, one of them stepped forward, tall, scarred, wearing the ragged robes of a foreman. He knelt, not out of worship, but respect. "We saw your fire tear the sky. We saw gods fall. What do you need?" I didn't waste words. I unwrapped the railgun barrel and showed them how to make the Council bleed. In the 3 weeks that followed, 5 colonies revolted. Jarquel was the first. They waited until a transport vessel landed with guards and fresh extraction orders. Then they unleashed hell, improvised railguns built from mining drills, plasma cutters converted into rifles, armor made from broken loader frames. They killed the Council's enforcers in under an hour. They recorded it, and then they broadcast the footage through the Undernet, a smuggler-run comms network too decentralized for the Council to track. We are Quandori. We are not afraid. The humans lit the fire. We carry the torch. I watched that broadcast in a frozen bunker in the Siberian wastes, watched Krieg nod slowly as it played. "1 becomes 2, he said. 2 becomes a plague." The Council responded the way cowards always do, brutally and far too late. They sent a decimation fleet to Jarquel. Standard Council doctrine: kill 10 for everyone that rises. They expected submission. Instead, they found the entire population evacuated into the tunnels. And at the heart of the colony's capital spire, they found something else. A core, wired with stolen antimatter cells and tied to a pressure plate. When the Admiral entered the command dome, the last remaining Quandori child stepped forward and whispered in her own tongue, "For Earth." Then the world blew apart. By the time news of Jarquel's explosion reached the Council's inner ring, 3 more colonies had declared rebellion, none of them human. We weren't just fighting now. We were infecting the galaxy with the idea that the Council wasn't invincible, that gods could die screaming just like the rest of us. And they hated us for it. Back on Earth, the second generation of railguns were being prepped, no longer cobbled together in the dark. Now they were engineered, by men with scars on their hands and no illusions in their hearts, each one smaller, more efficient, portable enough to be smuggled in pieces aboard ships headed for border systems. We called them crown splitters, because that's what they did. Wherever we sent one, a throne cracked. Krieg put me in charge of Phantom Division, a unit built for infiltration, not direct assault. No ranks, no medals, just purpose. We weren't an army. We were a virus. I recruited from the worst places: the ruins of Johannesburg, the ash forests of Alaska, the undersea vaults near former Bangkok. Men who had killed before, men who wouldn't hesitate. Men like me. One of them, A mute with half his face burned off, didn't even have a name. We called him Grinder because that's how he fought. Close, brutal, no hesitation. He once took down a Praetorian enforcer with nothing but a mining spike and a cable. These were my brothers. We didn't speak much. But when we moved, entire planets shivered. Our first target was Vel Tirana, a council-owned world used for experimentation. Civilians didn't even know it existed. The entire surface was one massive facility built to test biological weapons on the council's own dissidents. They called it a correctional research world. We called it what it was: hell. We got in through a supply ship run by defectors, spent 4 days inside filtration vents waiting for the shift change. The things we saw there? Not even war prepares you for that. Prisoners with their spines fused to walls, test subjects injected with acid nanites, left screaming for weeks before they died. Children used to test sonic weapons that liquefied organs without touching skin. This wasn't control. It was butchery. We didn't sabotage Vel Tirana. We butchered it. Grinder led the charge through Lab Sector 7. No guns, just blades. We didn't plant bombs. We planted crown splitters in the reactor vents, in the fuel silos, in the cryovaults where council scientists kept themselves frozen between atrocities. We didn't leave anyone alive. They had chances to surrender. Some begged. We remembered the children in glass tanks. And we pressed the triggers. The blast from Vel Tirana took out 2 orbital satellites and cracked the planet's crust. The council couldn't hide that. They couldn't call it sabotage, because the prison logs had been uploaded to the undernet before the final detonation. Every file, every scream, every experiment. Suddenly, billions across the galaxy knew the truth. The Council wasn't a protector, it was a monster, and Earth had become the monster hunter. By now, human sabotage cells existed on every fringe world. Former Council subjects began reaching out, secret signals, offers of alliance. We didn't accept them all. Some were opportunists, but others had blood in their eyes. The kind that only came from seeing your people torn apart while the stars watched. We gave them blueprints, not just for railguns, but for resistance. The galaxy's balance was breaking. Trade routes collapsed, rebellions sparked. And still, the Council tried to pretend they were in control. They passed new decrees, new execution laws, openly targeted any species caught harboring human sympathizers. One species, the Volari, refused to turn over a human cell hidden in their capital, so the Council bombed them from orbit, 10 million dead. And what did the Volari do? They hijacked a Council dreadnought and rammed it into a military academy on Hesser Prime. This wasn't our war anymore. It was everyone's. We had become the match, the spark in dry grass, and every time a new flame rose, the Council became more frantic, more brutal, more exposed. Krieg didn't live to see the 5th rebellion. He died in his sleep, heart finally giving out after years of pushing a broken body past its limits. We buried him in silence, no speeches, no flags, just a railgun core placed over his chest. Because that's what he gave us, not hope, direction, and now that direction pointed forward, through blood, fire, and the bones of empires. I watched the stars that night from the bunker roof. Dozens of them streaked across the sky, not shooting stars, burning ships. The war was spreading now, not in waves, in fractures, and one by one, those fractures would collapse the crown. Not because we were strong, not because we were noble, but because we were the only ones willing to go all the way. And we weren't stopping. Not until the Council was dust. And every system remembered the name. Human. The universe had bled. Gothriel 9. Jar Quell. Vel Tirana. We'd left our mark like a trail of gunpowder winding through the stars. And the match had already been lit. But a trail only matters if it leads somewhere. Krieg's death hit us hard. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a leader in the traditional sense. He was an iron-boned son of Earth who kept the fire alive in the darkest hours. When everything else crumbled, he stood like a goddamn mountain. And then he died in a cot. Heart collapsed under the weight of war. No explosions, no last stand. Just gone. That's when the splinters started to show. We had the fire. We had the rage. But what we didn't have anymore was direction. The colonies were rebelling. Alien species were joining the cause. Council trade was breaking down. But Earth itself was fracturing. Too many voices. Too many agendas. We'd spent years burning things down. Now we had to decide what the hell we were going to build. The arguments in the Arctic Bunker Council were loud, fast, and close to violent. Some wanted peace, thought we'd made our point. Others wanted to escalate, to begin attacking core council worlds. Some idiots, mostly corporate survivors who crawled out of cryovaults like roaches, proposed opening trade deals with neutral parties to establish interstellar diplomacy. They were nearly shot on the spot. I sat in the back of the war room while a dozen grizzled commanders screamed over each other, and all I could think was, we're going to lose, not to the council, to ourselves. Then the door opened, and he walked in. No one recognized him at first. He wasn't tall, didn't look like a soldier, wore a battered coat lined with solar fabric, eyes hidden behind cracked red lenses, beard like broken steel wire. He didn't say anything. Just tossed a battered data core onto the table. It pulsed. The holo lit up, showing an old orbital design, one we hadn't seen in over a decade. A black, angular dreadnought blueprint with reinforced hull segments and a spinal cannon housing larger than anything ever built on Earth. Some of the commanders leaned in, others sneered. "What the hell is this?" one of them asked. The man finally spoke. His voice was quiet, flat, dead. "It's the blueprint for Earth's first fleet, and the name of your new enemy's capital." He raised his head, and I finally saw his face. That wasn't just any man, that was Roth Amon. 10 years ago, Roth Amon had led the Titan Rebellion, an attempt to hijack the early asteroid colonies and militarize them into a spacefaring human kingdom. Back then, Earth wasn't ready for the stars, and the rebellion failed. Roth vanished. Everyone assumed he'd died in exile, executed by council proxies, or assassinated by the same politicians who begged for peace. But here he was, alive and with plans. "The council has a fallback world," Roth said, dragging the holo forward with a flick of his gloved fingers. "They don't tell anyone about it. It's not on maps, not in trade records. It's not Aurelius. It's older, more fortified, more cruel." The image changed. A black world surrounded by orbiting rings, defensive arrays thousands of kilometers thick. They call it Ophirion. It's where the remaining high-bloods fled after Aurelius burned. He turned to us. "That's where we end this war." There was silence in the room. Heavy, tense, because what he was proposing was suicide, a frontal assault on a planet fortified before Earth had electricity. Impossible. Insane. But the room didn't dismiss him, because the men sitting at that table were all the same kind of broken. We didn't care if it was impossible. We cared if it hurt them. Roth spent 6 hours explaining his plan. It wasn't elegant, but it was beautiful in its brutality. Step 1. Build the fleet, not to match them, to scare them. Step 2. Disrupt deeper infrastructure, communications, food routes, reproduction chains. Step 3. Hit Ophirion so hard the galaxy feels it in their bloodstream. By the end of the briefing, no one argued. Even the pacifists had gone quiet. And that's when Earth began to change. The new program was called Project Dustbringer. It took all remaining resources, everything left in Earth's fractured, buried tech hubs, and poured them into a single objective: build ships that didn't just win. Build ships that humiliated. I was reassigned from Phantom Division to Hammer Corps, an elite strike unit embedded in Dustbringer's build zones. Our job was simple: security, but not from aliens, from humans. Because now that we were winning, everyone wanted a piece of the crown. Old politicians trying to worm their way into command structures, former CEOs offering resources in exchange for future positions, even council spies disguised as defectors. The first time we caught one, he was wearing a human corpse's face, literally, grafted on with biostitch technology. He made it 4 steps into the shipyard before Grinder opened his skull with a fusion torch. We didn't ask questions after that. We didn't give warnings. You crossed into Hammer Corps territory without clearance. You died. Period. The first prototype rolled out 119 days after Roth took command. The UNS Obsidian Silence. She was beautiful in the way cliffs are beautiful. Jagged, thick, blacker than night, with no windows, just sensor nodes, railgun housing, and heat sinks large enough to vent a fusion core into subspace. Her crew was hand-picked, all orphans of the Council's wrath. Her captain? A woman who hadn't spoken in 3 years since watching her family suffocate under orbital siege. She didn't need to speak. The Obsidian spoke for her. And when she did her first warp jump test run, every sensor in a 10-system radius caught the signal. The Council noticed, and they panicked. The Obsidian Silence wasn't alone for long. By day 172, Earth had 4 ships in the void. By day 209, we had 9, and each was meaner than the last. No diplomatic suites. No luxury pods, no safety rails, just blood, steel, and guns. That's when the rumors started among the resistance colonies. They weren't calling them ships. They were calling them Titans. The Council called an emergency summit. Not public, of course. But we had spies by then. We heard the panic. One of their prime ministers asked, "What happens if humanity builds 100 of them?" The response was, "Then we go extinct." Too late. We were already on number 11. Roth didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He just stood at the shipyard every night, coat flapping in the cold, red lenses staring into the void. He didn't lead with speeches. He led by presence. And that was enough. Because when a man as broken as him refuses to give up, you don't either. I was promoted during this time, not because I asked. Because there was no one else left alive from Phantom Division. I became commander of the UNS Bonehowl, a mid-range strike ship built for planetary assaults. We were fast, ugly, understaffed. But we had a crown-splitter railgun that could punch through a destroyer's core. And we had nothing to lose. On our first mission, we raided a prison moon used to hold hybrids, genetically mutilated species considered impure by the Council's caste systems. We expected resistance. We expected horror. What we didn't expect was what the prisoners did when we opened the gates. They didn't run. They didn't scream. They sang, in their own languages, voices overlapping. And one of them, some freakish mix of insect and human, walked up to me, dropped to its knees, and placed something in my hand. A child's bracelet, human-made. I don't know what it meant. Maybe it was stolen. Maybe it was a reminder. But I kept it, wrapped it around the hilt of my sidearm. Because even if I didn't understand the gesture, I understood the message. They're watching us now. Not just humans. Everyone. The first stage of Dustbringer is nearly complete. Our fleet's growing, our plans are forming, and deep in the bowels of a facility built beneath the Atlantic Trench, Roth is preparing something else. Something darker. Something we're not even allowed to speak of. But I've seen the blueprints, and if he's building what I think he is, the next railgun won't fire tungsten. It'll fire planets. We thought we were the monsters. After Aurelius burned and the crown splitters began lighting up the stars like funeral pyres, we started to believe we were the ones writing the new laws of nature. That belief died with the obsidian silence. Her captain, Celine Vokar, had survived the orbital suffocation of her home. She hadn't spoken in years. Her silence became a legend. Her ship bore the same silence, but its voice was louder than thunder when it screamed. And it screamed in its final hour. We lost contact with the Obsidian on day 241 of the campaign. She'd been assigned to raid a trade corridor deep in the Eclipton Spiral, a region lined with decaying jump gates and abandoned council infrastructure. A shortcut for smugglers, a death trap for anything else. It was supposed to be routine. Scan the route, drop magnetic charges, snipe a few council runners carrying fuel cells and synthetic DNA codes. She jumped in with her escort, the UNS Bladewake, a fast-response corvette built for evasion and harassment. Only the Bladewake came back, half its hull missing, and every crew member dead except one. The survivor was a junior comms officer named Harlan Tour. He wasn't a soldier, just a relay tech, bookish, slim, the kind of guy who probably read old Earth novels between diagnostic runs. When the recovery team pulled him from the Bladewake's ruined core, he was strapped into a coolant tank, screaming. They thought he was injured, but he wasn't. Not physically. What broke him wasn't what hit them. It was what watched them burn. I was called to the debrief by Roth himself. That didn't happen often. He didn't like wasting time on reports. He either gave orders or funerals. But this one? He wanted to see it with his own eyes. They brought Harlan into the cold interrogation chamber, strapped him down, not out of cruelty, but because his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He had plasma burn scars on his arms from sealing emergency hatches, the kind that said he fought like hell just to make it out. His face was pale, jaw twitching, eyes unfocused. He spoke without prompting. It didn't have a face. Roth didn't blink. What did? The thing that took the silence. We tried to make sense of his report. The obsidian silence had approached the trade corridor like planned. Bladewake at her flank. No enemy pings, no movement. Then the nav systems began to fail. Not jammed. Inverted. Space bent, that's what he said. It was like the stars folded inside themselves. The sensors showed negative light, negative mass. That's not supposed to exist. Next, the silence's artificial gravity collapsed. Not failed. Collapsed. Like it had been pulled inward by something bigger than physics. Then came the signal. A single repeating tone. No words. Just this sickening drone, like bone grinding against metal underwater. Harlan imitated it for us. The noise made one of the soldiers in the room flinch. The other threw up. Roth didn't move. He just leaned forward and said, "What did you see?" Harlan's voice cracked. "A ship, maybe. A shape. Big. Wrong. It wasn't built. It was grown, or formed. And it didn't move like anything I've ever seen. It didn't accelerate. It just appeared. Like it was always there." He paused, then whispered. It looked like it was breathing. The Obsidian fired first. Standard response protocol. Railgun shot at full charge. The projectile hit, didn't bounce, didn't penetrate. It sank. Right into the surface of the thing, like it melted into it, like it wanted to be absorbed. Then the Obsidian's railgun imploded. Not exploded. Imploded. One moment it was there. The next, it crumpled into a point and vanished. The last thing Harlan saw before the Bladewake initiated its emergency jump was the silence splitting in two. Not from weapons fire. From the inside. We didn't know what it was. The Council didn't announce anything. But we found the truth, a week later. A fragment of data ripped from a stolen Council courier drone. Coded in ancient dialect, old, paranoid, full of sacrificial sigils and classified as Anathema Class. The file's title? Vulthex. That was their answer to us. Not more fleets, not more bombs, something older, something they unburied. According to the data, the Vulthex wasn't council-made. It was discovered, trapped, on a dead moon orbiting a black dwarf beyond even their empire's reach. A living void ship, organic in structure, subdimensional in nature, and completely insane. The High-Bloods kept it secret, studied it in rituals, not science. They didn't command it, they fed it. And then, when humanity rose and their gods fell, they released it. We ran simulations. Not even our titans could match it in mass. The best guess was that it existed in partial realities, phasing between our space and something older, something crueler. Its armor couldn't be scanned. Its weapons didn't fire. They devoured. And it was headed for the Cradle Array. The Cradle Array was humanity's Hope Project, a ring of orbital elevators tied to a mass driver facility designed to launch the next generation of crown splitters directly into deep space. It wasn't a weapon. It was a forge. We were planning to launch 3 more dreadnoughts from there within the month, and now the Vulthex was coming for it. Roth called every commander to War Table Delta that night. The room was different this time. No shouting, no politics, just war-scarred soldiers waiting to hear how we fight something that science doesn't believe in. He walked in holding a vial. Inside was blood. Dark, viscous, moving, even though it was sealed. He held it up. This came from the Bladewake's hull. It's alive, and it remembers. He set it down. They've finally done it. They've gone where even monsters don't tread. He looked at each of us. And then he said the one thing none of us wanted to hear. We're not just fighting an empire anymore. We're fighting the end of reason. The next 48 hours were a blur. Every ship was redirected to defend the Cradle Array. Half the fleet was still incomplete. Crews undertrained, ammunition stockpiles still being processed. Didn't matter. This wasn't a mission. It was a wall. If the Vulthex got through and destroyed the Cradle, it wouldn't just set us back. It would end the resistance. Because hope was fragile, and the Cradle was hope. I was assigned to coordinate orbital defenses from the UNS Bastion Fang, a shipyard-class dreadnought repurposed as a command carrier. It was barely spaceworthy. Weld marks still glowing in places. Crew sleeping in the unfinished hangar decks. But it had targeting systems. And comms. And I still had Grinder by my side. He hadn't spoken since Velterana, but I knew what he was thinking. If this thing bleeds, we make it scream. The first sign of the Vulthex came 12 hours ahead of schedule, not on sensors, in dreams. Our comms officers began reporting nightmares, same images, a black shape, a hole in the stars, screams in tones we couldn't vocalize. Then came the comms failure. We couldn't talk to the Cradle. Then the lights dimmed. Not the ship. The sky. Stars vanished, blotted out. It wasn't stealth. It was presence. The Vulthex had arrived. What followed wasn't a battle. It was an exorcism. We fired everything. Crown splitters, beam arrays, drones, torpedoes. Nothing hit. Everything warped before contact. The Vulthex didn't dodge. It warped space. But then, it hesitated. Near the Cradle, it slowed, hovered, like it was confused. That's when Roth sent the signal. The Widow's Cough 2, a refitted stealth bomber, slid beneath its hull and dropped something new. A fusion-tethered quantum shatter mine. Experimental, illegal even by our standards. It detonated, not in light, but in silence. And the Vulthex screamed, not in sound, in gravity. Ships shook, men vomited. A child aboard the Cradle was born blind from the ripple. But the Vulthex bled. Black tendrils burst from its side, and for the first time it moved like an animal. It fled, not far. but far enough. We didn't kill it, but we proved it wasn't invincible, and that meant everything. Afterward, Roth called it a lesson. They wanted gods. They found demons. We'll burn those too. We all knew this was only the beginning. The Volthex wasn't the last weapon the Council would unleash. It was only the first they were willing to lose. But they made a mistake showing us that thing. Because now we weren't just building ships. We were building cages, and we were filling them with things worse than monsters. You don't survive something like the Volthex and come out clean. We'd faced monsters before. Slavers, tyrants, genetically modified nightmares that burned our cities and called it order. But the Volthex, that was other. That was the void looking back. Even as we licked our wounds and reinforced the cradle array, something colder began to seep through the cracks of our victory. Doubt. Not from the soldiers, not from the broken few still fighting with blood and bone, from the suits, from the survivors of the old order, the bureaucrats, the hidden ones, the ones who vanished when the orbital cannons hit Earth and crawled out of bunkers the moment we struck back. They were called the Preservation Circle now. Back then, they were the United Earth Authority. Globalists, economists, technocrats, the ones who handed our planet to the Council a generation ago to buy peace. They hadn't changed, just renamed, like rot under fresh paint. And they wanted the war ended, on their terms. I saw it first in whispers. Comm logs being rerouted, orders changed without authorization, convoys redirected, parts missing from shipyards, and then came the leaks. Confidential ops exposed on the undernet, secure blueprints of the Titans found floating on neutral colonies. At first, we blamed the Council's infiltration cells, until one of our own engineers caught a Preservation Circle delegate, bribing a technician to swap out a Railgun's core. Sabotage, internal, deliberate. That was the turning point. We brought the delegate into interrogation, thinking it would be routine. But the bastard walked in like he owned the place, hair combed, uniform pressed, a smile that didn't belong in a war room. His name was Draven Vale, former economic advisor to the World Trade Restructure Board before the scorching, now the self-appointed spokesman of the Circle. He didn't wait for questions. He leaned across the table and said it like he was doing us a favor. "You've made your point. The Council's bleeding. But if we keep escalating, we won't have a galaxy left to rule." He sounded calm, like the deaths of our people were numbers in a spreadsheet, like the cradle array didn't nearly get swallowed whole by a ship grown from madness. I remember what I told him. "We're not here to rule. We're here to bury the bastards." He just shook his head. "You still think this ends with victory? It doesn't. It ends with extinction. Ours or theirs. And if we don't take the offer now, Earth will be uninhabitable by the time you're done." That word, offer, hung in the air like a bomb. We pressed him. Hard. That's when he admitted it. The Circle had been communicating with the Council behind our backs. They claimed to be neutral mediators. What they really were? Cowards trying to buy a seat at the next table. And the price? They'd agreed to deliver Roth Amon. Roth didn't flinch when we told him. He didn't yell, didn't scream. Just stood there, staring out at the hangar bays, watching ships get welded under the thunder of arc fire and sweat. Then he said something I'll never forget. "They think we're building a fleet to win a war. But what we're building is a warning. One that echoes after we're dust." We asked what he wanted to do about Draven Vale. He didn't answer. He just walked out. Vale disappeared 2 days later. No alarms, no trace. We assume he was processed. I didn't ask. Because I agreed. This wasn't just about council or conquest. This was about cleaning the bones. No parasites, no politicians, no survivors with silver tongues and soft hands. Only builders, only burners. But the circle didn't stop. They were like roaches in the walls. Every Titan had someone whispering from the shadows, offering bribes, promising promotions, begging for surrender. Even I got one, slid under my door in a sealed packet. No return address. Just a message. You've done enough. Let us handle what comes next. You deserve rest. Inside the envelope was a voucher, a shuttle ticket. To a hidden orbital retreat colony in the Lagrange zone. I took it to the forge and welded it to a steel beam with a bolt torch. Rest? We'd rest when the last council throne was a ruin, and the last whisper of the old world was ash. But things were getting worse, not on the front lines. Inside, Earth itself was cracking. Resource shortages, overworked labor camps, civilian rebellions in abandoned cities where food wasn't reaching fast enough. Not because we lacked supply, because the circle was choking distribution. Passive sabotage. Let the people starve, and they'd beg for peace. Let the resistance crumble from within, and they'd step in to save it. They were playing the long game. We didn't have time for that. So Roth gave the order, one that even shook us. Declare the circle as collaborators. No trials, no warnings. If they wear the sigil, put them down. Purge orders aren't clean. We tried to keep it surgical. Strike teams, black bag extractions. But Earth isn't a clean place anymore. It's rust and concrete, hunger and smoke. And when you start hunting traitors in the dirt, innocents bleed too. There were mistakes, there were riots, and the circle? They used it, released footage of executions, footage of fire bombings in districts they claimed were medical hubs. Suddenly, we weren't just fighting the council. We were being painted as terrorists again, even by our own. I walked through the ruins of District 9B in northern Moscow afterward. Bombed-out housing, graffiti on the walls, but not pro-resistance graffiti, not anymore. I saw tags that said things like, "Better fed than free," "Let the council rule, we'll live," "No more kings, not Earth," "Not alien." They weren't loyal to the council. They weren't loyal to us. They were tired, too tired to fight anymore. And that's when I realized, hope is a weapon. If we didn't give it back to them, we'd lose, not to an alien empire, to exhaustion. So Roth changed the play. We didn't just purge the circle. We exposed them, hacked into their comms, leaked every back-channel agreement, every signed deal, every lie. And most damning of all, the recordings of them laughing over Earth's surrender, of them calling us rabid dogs with bullets, of them negotiating terms to sell the cradle array to the council in exchange for partial species sovereignty and the right to limited planetary development. That broke the spell, because now everyone knew. The circle didn't want peace. They wanted the leash back. The public turned. Not instantly, but steadily. The underground posters changed. Now they said, "They ruled with chains. You rule with fire. Let the stars fear us. Council, circle, both die." Even the neutral colonies that had stayed out of the war began feeding us info, coordinates, defectors, old weapons caches from the first orbital era. Because if we were the last madmen left standing, at least we weren't liars. Still, the damage had been done. We were bleeding resources. The inner cities were starting to crumble under the weight of the war. The shipyards were working double shifts, and crews were sleeping on concrete under fusion lights because there weren't enough barracks. And the Volthex hadn't returned yet, which meant it wasn't dead, just watching, waiting. Roth knew we needed more than silence and fear. He knew the people needed a face. Something to believe in. So he stepped onto a podium for the first time since his rebellion. No broadcast suits, no prepared speech, no anthem. Just him, a camera, a cracked lens, and his voice. He said, "They offered us extinction with manners. They wanted us dead, quiet, obedient. The circle fed us to them like cattle. We didn't burn our world to lose it. We didn't build these guns to bow again. If they want peace, they can dig for it in their graves. We're not stopping. Not until there's nothing left of their crowns but ash and static. It wasn't broadcast across the stars. It didn't go viral, because we didn't need it to. We played it in the labor yards, in the ship bays, in the ruined cities, the places where hope was bleeding out. And when it finished, men picked up their tools, women strapped on rifles. Children stopped crying and started building again, because Roth didn't ask for trust. He gave us a direction. Forward. Now the circle is gone. The council is bleeding. And Earth is rising. Not clean, not whole, but hungry. And now we're ready to stop surviving. We're ready to start cleansing. It started with silence, not the kind you expect during war, not the silence of exhaustion or the lull after an orbital strike. This was the kind that settles over a place just before a scream. Facility K-27 was our pride. A hidden arc factory buried 2 kilometers under the Andes, pumping out pieces of our next-generation dreadnought, the UNS Grave Path. Bigger than the Obsidian Silence, meaner, equipped with a prototype double-barreled crown-splitter spine cannon. K-27 was where we bent the universe around our will. And then it went dark. No comms failure, no reactor breach, just silence. And then came the blinking distress signal, old-school Morse code, 3 words, repeated again and again. God inside gates. At first, we thought it was a glitch, some low-level technician playing games with outdated protocols. But Roth didn't treat it like a joke. He read the transmission once, stared at it for maybe 5 seconds, then looked to me. You're taking the Bastion Fang. Full security loadout. No delay. I asked him why. He didn't answer at first, just said one word. Nix. Nix wasn't a person. Not exactly. She was a council asset, an infiltrator class born from a program we barely believed existed. Biological fabrication with quantum cognition. Part synthetic, part bioflesh, entirely weapon. She didn't wear disguises. She didn't need to. She walked into places and became them. 6 years ago, she assassinated the entire leadership of the Heskan uprising by posing as their medic. Spent 3 months gaining their trust, then poisoned their water filters and walked out before their bodies hit the ground. The council only ever used her when nothing else worked. And apparently, she'd decided Earth was worth her attention. We dropped into the Andes under blackout. 8 of us. Hammer Corps veterans. Silent. Sharp. We came through the glacier shaft on cable lifts, descending into the dark with frost clinging to our armor. The first thing that hit me wasn't the cold. It was the smell. Burned meat. Ozone. Blood. We reached subdeck 3. No power. Emergency lights flickering. The hallway walls were streaked with something dark. Not just blood, marks, symbols, old alien scripts. Ones I'd only ever seen in scavenged council databanks. Roth later confirmed they were pre-council dialect. Ritualistic, forbidden even by their own kind. They said things like, unclean birth, entropy's bride, memory eats flesh. We found the first body in the generator room. Stripped naked. No wounds, no visible trauma. But his eyes were gone, not removed. Missing. Like they'd never existed. His dog tags had been fused into his throat. Literally fused. Molecular bonding like high-temperature welding. Another body had fingernails driven into their own chest like a makeshift prayer. And someone had carved one word into the wall above them. Look. We tried accessing the surveillance system. What we found was worse than no footage. The cameras had been looped. Same 5 seconds, again and again. The main corridor. Empty. Red lights flickering, then a blur, then a shadow that wasn't a shadow, then static. The deeper we went, the more wrong it felt. No signs of breach, no forced doors, no external hacking. and yet all 314 staff were missing or dead. We found a few alive. Well, breathing. One of the engineers had clawed out his tongue and jammed himself into a coolant pipe. Another curled in a fetal position, whispering in a voice that wasn't his. "She's here, she's here, she's here, she's here." We sedated him. Barely. His pulse was 220 BPM. His blood had changed color. We reached the central forge chamber at 0300 hours, where the Gravepath's spinal cannon was being assembled. And there she was. Nyx, standing in the center of the darkened forge, barefoot, wearing a technician's uniform soaked in blood. Her eyes were pitch black. No sclera, no iris. Just darkness that shimmered like oil. She didn't run, didn't speak. She just stood there, hands folded, staring at the unfinished cannon like it was a sleeping god. Grinder raised his rifle. "Down." She didn't flinch. She just smiled. A slow, horrible smile. "Hello again, Kane." She wasn't talking to me. She was talking to Roth. We didn't fire, not immediately. We were trained killers, but Nyx wasn't something you approached without knowing the play. She lifted her hand. Index finger coated in some kind of ash. Bone white. And she drew a circle on the ground. Not random. Deliberate. Inside the circle was a symbol I'd only seen once, during the Vulthex encounter. A spiral that folded into itself. We later found it encoded in Council Blacksite texts under a label. Category: Null God. Subdesignate: Eater of Pattern. We advanced. 3 meters in, I gave the order. Grinder fired. Direct chest shot. Armor-piercing round. She didn't move. The bullet slowed mid-air, folded in half, and vanished. She blinked. The lights blew out. We lit torches instantly. She was gone. But the circle was still there, glowing. And the cannon? Missing. The entire fusion-forged railgun spine. Gone. Like someone had deleted it from existence. We evacuated immediately. 2 men didn't make it. One slit his own throat in the elevator, the other stepped into the gravity chamber without a suit. We never found his body. Back on the Bastion Fang, Roth met us personally. Not angry. Not surprised. Just grim. I told him what she said. Called him Kane. He didn't respond. Just stared out the view window at the shipyards below, then whispered, "She was my sister." It didn't make sense. Nyx wasn't human. She couldn't be. But Roth explained. Not everything. Just enough. Before the scorching, before the Council revealed its full claws, Roth had been part of an off-world genetics initiative. One meant to build cognitive warforms using human DNA, spliced with recovered alien fragments. Project name: Seraphim. He was one of the developers. And Nyx? She was Test Subject 0, born in a vat, raised without voice, trained to interface with psionic structures buried beneath Council outposts on Saturn's moons. She wasn't his blood sister, but he raised her like one, until the project was sold out. To the Council. By the same Earth technocrats who later formed the Circle. They took her, changed her, twisted her, made her forget. Roth thought she'd been destroyed during the Europa collapse. He'd buried the files, buried the past. But now she was back, and she'd stolen our most powerful weapon before it was finished. Why? We didn't know, but we had a guess. The Vulthex hadn't returned, which meant it was waiting, and now we had proof that the Council wasn't just experimenting with monsters. They were breeding them, training them, unleashing them. Nyx wasn't a spy, she was a conductor, and she was going to deliver our cannon to the Vulthex, to learn from it, to mimic it, to build a weapon that could collapse cities without firing a shot. We needed to get ahead of them. So Roth made a call I didn't expect. He reopened Project Graveborn, a weapons program even he'd shut down. Something we had buried in shame after what it did to the test subjects. Because we needed something that could track Nyx. Not with sensors, not with AI, but with blood. The hunt has begun. Across abandoned moons, across cursed battlefields and derelict council temples, we're chasing a ghost wearing our past like a skin. And Roth? He doesn't sleep anymore. He just sits in the black of the war chamber, watching Nyx's face flicker on screen, whispering one word like a curse. Sister. When you build a monster to fight monsters, you don't expect it to look like you. You expect claws, fangs, something you can point to and say, that doesn't belong in this world. But Graveborn didn't look like that. He looked like a man. Until he didn't. We found him in Vault 0A3, buried beneath the Mariana Core array. Caged for 5 years in a cryo-seal, surrounded by radiation dampeners and reinforced soulstone pylons, old tech, deep myth, stuff we barely understood but trusted enough not to touch. He was labeled Subject 11, Mason. We called him Graveborn because that's what he was, dead before he ever woke up. Roth didn't want to activate him. Not really. But we were out of options. Nyx had vanished with the Grave Path's spinal cannon. She was somewhere deep in council space now, or worse, in Volthex territory. And the patterns we were intercepting, they weren't natural. Planets going silent. Trade networks falling apart without being touched. Whole species dropping into collective sleep. No signs of violence, just dreams. That's what the messages said. We dreamed too long. We saw her in the tide. We are not alone in our minds anymore. The Volthex wasn't just eating matter. It was learning how to eat thought. That's why Graveborn had to wake. Because Nyx wasn't just carrying the cannon. She was carrying a map. A blueprint to something worse than weapons. A future where war wasn't fought with steel and bullets, but with consciousness. When the stasis field dropped, the temperature in the vault fell 20 degrees. The power grid flickered, and Graveborn opened his eyes. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at the ceiling like it was the sky. His vitals were off the charts, 4 hearts beating independently, lung efficiency at 400%, neural activity that mirrored both human and alien structures. The med team wanted to run tests. Roth stopped them. He walked in alone. No armor, no guards, just silence. And for 10 full minutes, the two of them stared at each other through the frost. Then Graveborn whispered, "She's ahead of us." We didn't understand how he knew, but when he looked at a map of Volthex anomalies, he pointed to a star cluster we hadn't even flagged yet. The Corvex Shroud. A dead zone. Black stars. No comms, no heat, no life, and right in the center, a beacon signal. Human frequency. Our frequency. Graveborn smiled. It didn't look right on his face. "She wants us to come, so I will." I was assigned to command the UNS Dirgefall, a new cruiser class retrofitted for sub-dimensional entry. Experimental shielding, grav drive fallback, and Graveborn. My orders were clear. Deliver him to the Shroud. Engage only if necessary. Retrieve the cannon. Or destroy it. Roth didn't say goodbye. He just nodded as we launched. And I remember thinking, we're not coming back from this. The Shroud didn't look like space. It looked like absence. Every scanner failed. Every reading bent back on itself. The stars were black holes, not spheres. And inside it, something massive, not moving, just waiting. We drifted for 6 hours before anything responded. Then a signal came through. Audio only. Old Earth music. A piano. Clair de Lune. But slowed. Distorted. Almost like it was being played underwater, each note collapsing under pressure. Then her voice. Nyx. "Hello, Kane." She was talking to Graveborn, and he answered. "I told you I'd find you." We dropped from warp inside a hollow space, like the inside of a shell. And there it was, the Gravepath's cannon, mounted on a spire of alien bone, modified, twisted. It didn't point outward anymore, it pointed inward, at the planet below, and circling it was the Vulthex, dormant, but not asleep. Graveborn stepped forward. "She's feeding it." We asked how. He didn't answer. He just pulled off his gloves. His hands weren't normal. Veins like wires, skin slightly reflective. And beneath the left wrist, a pulse that didn't match his own. A second life. We touched down in low orbit near the cannon's platform. The planet below writhed, literally writhed, with structures that looked like buildings but breathed like lungs. Nyx was there, standing at the top, wearing something that looked like a pilot's suit made of silk and bone. She looked perfect, not in a beauty sense, in a design sense. Like everything about her had been measured and sculpted for one purpose. She smiled. "You brought my brother." Graveborn stepped forward. "I'm not your brother. That man's dead." She tilted her head. "Then why do you still hear my voice in your dreams?" We didn't open fire, because we couldn't. The moment we raised weapons, the gravity shifted. Not down, not up, sideways. We couldn't move. She raised her hand, and every man in the squad started screaming, not from pain, from overload, brainwave saturation, dream fracture. Only Graveborn stood still. He raised one hand and made a gesture I'd never seen before. And the world stopped. Nyx collapsed. So did the cannon. It didn't explode. It melted, slowly, folding like wax under heat. And the Vulthex screamed. The entire star cluster rippled, space rippled, like someone dropped a stone into time. And Graveborn turned to me. "Run!" We jumped, full warp. The Dirgefall took damage. Half the crew didn't make it. Graveborn stayed behind. Or maybe was taken. We don't know. But when we returned, the shroud was gone. The star cluster? Missing. Not destroyed, missing. And in our wake, a message, broadcasted in every language, text only. 6 words. "We remember who fed us first." Roth read the message in silence, then said something cold. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a test. We asked what that meant. He stared at the stars. "We thought we were burning the Empire down, but they weren't scared of death. They were scared of the thing they buried. And now it knows we're alive. We thought the Vulthex was their last weapon. Now we know better. It was theirs once, but not anymore. And Graveborn? He's not on comms. He's not in the databanks. But I still hear him, in my sleep, saying one word. Soon. We expected a counterattack. After Graveborn vanished, after the Vulthex howled through space like a dying god, after the shroud blinked out of existence like a bad memory, we thought the galaxy would burn. We thought fleets would warp in from 1,000 systems. We thought the Council would lash out, cornered and bleeding. Instead, they sent us a message, not encoded, not hidden, not even encrypted, just a single direct signal broadcast on all Terran frequencies. Humanity, we request peace, immediate, unconditional ceasefire. We will recognize your sovereignty and offer reparations. We only ask one thing: help us contain what you have awakened. No one spoke for a long time in the Bastion Fang's war room. Roth stood with his hands behind his back, shoulders tight, jaw locked. His face said nothing, but I could tell he didn't trust a word of it. None of us did, because the Council didn't beg. They didn't compromise. They conquered. And now suddenly they were playing diplomat? Bullshit. Still, we listened. Because if there was a chance, any chance that this wasn't a trap, we had to consider it, even if it reeked of fear, especially because it reeked of fear. The ambassador arrived 3 days later. Not a warlord, not a military officer, a Kelleran priest. Species: translucent flesh, bioluminescent blood, triple-lobed hearts, deep into biopsionics. They didn't speak with mouths, they used aura resonance. Basically, they made you feel what they meant, and you were supposed to interpret it correctly. We had translators, of course. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was surviving what the ambassador projected. Because the moment they entered our chamber, everyone in the room felt the same thing. Dread. The kind that sinks into your marrow. The kind of fear that doesn't make you sweat or panic. It just makes you still. Like prey waiting for something in the tall grass. The ambassador didn't sit. They hovered, and through the resonance field we all heard a voice, not theirs, not human, not anything we could label, just a whisper. It dreams again. The council was broken. The Kelleran didn't hide it. They showed us entire systems gone dark. Council fleets drifting in orbit with no minds left inside. Planets where the oceans had frozen not from temperature, but from entropy collapse. Stars dimming, reality tearing. "You woke it," the ambassador said. "You fired the first nail into the old skin." They didn't blame us. That was the worst part. They didn't even hate us anymore. They just feared what was coming. The Vulthex had been a piece of something older. Something buried. We hadn't just awakened it. We'd fed it. With our rage. With our weapons. With our war. We asked what they wanted. The ambassador's resonance pulsed like cold metal. "The last god sleeps beneath a fractured moon. We do not speak its name. We only bury it." They showed us a location. Jar's Ring, a shattered planetary system beyond the edge of the mapped spiral. Graveborn had mentioned it once, called it a wound in the galaxy. The ambassador confirmed. "The wound is spreading. You must help us seal it." Roth didn't respond immediately. He paced the war room in silence, watching as the hologram of Jar's Ring rotated slowly above the table. Finally, he said, "We didn't fire the railgun to become janitors for your old sins. We fired it to survive." The ambassador nodded. They understood. "Help us, and we will give you access to the cradle stars, resources beyond your imagining, technology forbidden even to the Council's upper caste." I stood beside Roth, arms folded, watching the Kelleran pulse with quiet desperation. They were dying, and they knew it. They weren't offering peace because they wanted peace. They were offering it because they had nothing else left to offer. But even that wasn't what convinced us to act. It was what came next. The Kelleran reached into its cloak and removed a sphere, bone white, glowing from within. They placed it on the table. "This is the last known echo of your soldier, the one you called Graveborn." The sphere lit up, and for a moment the chamber filled with his voice. "Roth, she's not alone anymore." Then static, then silence. We launched Project Final Ember the next morning. No debate, no votes. Roth knew the war wasn't over. It had just changed shape. The Titans weren't enough anymore. We needed something bigger, something beyond machines. Beyond tactics. We needed belief. So Roth gave it to them. He ordered the construction of the Crucible. It wasn't a ship. It was a cathedral of war. A mobile space station the size of a small moon, built not for speed but for finality. Inside it, the last crown splitter ever forged. Not to fire at cities, not to destroy fleets, but to pierce dimensions. We weren't aiming at the Council anymore. We were aiming at the wound. The Crucible took every last resource we had. Old mines reopened, oceans drained, satellites cannibalized. Even Earth's moon was stripped for metal. This wasn't defense. This was the last play. And every man, woman, and child still loyal to the resistance knew it. There would be no retreat, no surrender. If the crucible fired, something ancient would die, or everything would. I was assigned as Roth's direct liaison on the crucible. The moment I set foot inside, I knew this wasn't just another war asset. This was a message. Steel arches shaped like ribs, halls lit by blood-red glow glass, engravings on every bulkhead, names of the dead, names of the fallen cities, names of the Council's sins, and at the heart of it all, the cannon. It didn't look like a weapon. It looked like judgment. The Council's fleets joined us. What was left of them, anyway. Some species refused. They still hated us. But others? Others finally saw the truth. We weren't the villains. We were the last wall between the void and everything that still breathed. Nyx had vanished completely. No trace, no signals. But Graveborn's echo. It repeated sometimes through the Crucible's systems. At random, no source, just his voice, low, tired. Not her anymore. Not since the dream walked in. We didn't know what it meant. But I felt it. The change in the air. In the sky itself. Like gravity had started whispering. Like the universe was waiting. Jar's ring came into view after 19 days of slow subwarp. The crucible exited into an orbital graveyard. Shattered moons. Ruined ships. Bones. Yes, bones. Drifting in perfect preservation. Some miles long. Unrecognizable shapes. Skulls that weren't skulls. Jaws with teeth made of stars. Limbs with arms growing out of arms. And in the center of the broken world, a hole. Not a crater. A hole. Black. Pulseless. Perfect. Like the universe had forgotten to fill it in. The wound. The last god's tomb. As we aligned the crucible, systems began failing. Not from damage. From rejection. Circuitry blinked off. Hulls groaned. Some crew began crying uncontrollably. Others screamed themselves into seizures. Whatever was in that hole, it didn't want us here. And then we heard her. Nyx. But she didn't speak through speakers. She spoke in our heads. I tried to show you mercy. Now I'll show you silence. And then, on the surface of the ruined moon, she appeared, walking out of the black, wearing Graveborn's skin, but not him, not anymore. He walked beside her, eyes hollow, face blank, and in his chest, the cannon core, still glowing. They weren't individuals anymore. They were hosts for something older, and they had one purpose. When the crucible fires, she said, we all end. Let me stop it, or I'll end you first. Roth stood at the command dais, staring down at them from orbit. He didn't blink, didn't speak. He just gave the order. Fire! I remember the sound the crucible made before it fired. It wasn't mechanical, wasn't the hiss of reactors or the whine of energy charging. It was a groan, a deep, low, impossible groan, like something alive was preparing to die. Like metal didn't want to obey anymore, like gravity was trying to pull the whole weapon backwards in time, back into silence. The entire ship shuddered, not from the weapon's core, but from something deeper, something beneath us. Roth stood at the center of the firing deck, fists clenched behind his back, staring down into the void below. Charge phase complete, I reported. My voice sounded like it came from a grave. He nodded once. Fire. And with that word, Earth sealed its fate. The Crucible's final railgun wasn't built to kill ships. It wasn't meant for flesh or steel. It was meant to tear dimensions, to pierce the wound at Jar's ring, to puncture the prison of the last god. It didn't fire tungsten. It fired a rod made from core-grafted void stone, laced with neutronium, wrapped in quantum-locked chainlight, a material we barely understood and could never replicate again. The round launched at 0.83 C. It vanished from our sensors after 3.4 seconds. And then, the universe screamed. No one moved, no alarms, no explosions, just the scream. Not physical, not auditory, mental. Everything in your head broke. I saw men collapse, blood pouring from their noses, their eyes. Others just stopped breathing, hearts seized. One of the senior nav officers tore out her own throat. She didn't even scream, just leaned forward and unmade herself. Outside, the black hole in the center of Jar's ring didn't implode. It opened, it folded back, and behind it, there was no space. There was no light, just a shape. Huge, endless, impossible, made of limbs that weren't limbs, teeth that circled into themselves, a body that didn't obey symmetry or reason, and a face. No, not a face. An idea. And it looked at us, not with hatred, not even recognition, just curiosity. Like a child watching ants build a fire, the crucible lost gravity. Time dilated. For 4 minutes, we were outside time. I looked across the deck and saw 3 versions of myself. One dead, one older, one still frozen. Roth didn't blink. He stood in the storm like a statue carved from war. The bridge windows were no longer showing stars. They showed history. Ours, theirs, all of it. Empires rising and falling in reverse. Ships forming from rust. Bodies reassembling in loops, one by one. The crew collapsed, not from wounds, from exposure. Then came Nyx. She emerged from the open wound, dragging what used to be Graveborn behind her like a chained dog. His body was wrong, stretched, cracked, held together by logic that no longer existed. The cannon we lost to her? It wasn't a weapon now. It was a mouth, embedded in his chest, gnashing, feeding, on time itself. And Nyx? She laughed. Not human, not alien, not sound. Her laugh was the removal of sound. "You fired a warning shot," she said, "into the mirror. Now it knows you're here." Roth finally moved. He stepped forward to the edge of the command dais, leaning on the rail, staring down at her. "Then I'll show it what we are." He pressed the failsafe. The secondary trigger. The crucible had never been designed to fire just once. Its true purpose? A second pulse. One that turned the dimensional cannon inward. A suicide shot. Not to kill the god, to collapse the pocket it lived in, to cut it off. But it needed time, 15 minutes. Nyx launched first. She didn't fly, she arrived. Next to Roth, next to me, next to the cannon, at the same time. Her body split into reflections, each one moving through a different thread of time. One version was wounded, one was on fire, one was still human. I fired at all 3. Only the one on fire dropped. The others bled light. Graveborn followed. He didn't walk. He unfolded into existence, screaming in silence. The thing in his chest fired a pulse. It wasn't heat. It wasn't pressure. It was deletion. 3 decks of the crucible ceased to exist. Not destroyed, just gone. Erased from probability. We fought. Not to win. To hold. Grinder was there. Bleeding from both eyes, holding the eastern reactor line with nothing but a fusion cutter and a bomb vest. He never said goodbye, just nodded. Then triggered the vest. Took out 2 Nyx reflections and a chunk of the cannon's lower chamber. Time bled. Reality stuttered. Ships orbiting the crucible began aging backwards. Messages arrived before they were sent. And all the while, the god watched. Not with eyes, with memory, and we felt it, our deaths, our futures, our extinction, over and over. Roth stood in the core chamber now, palm over the second pulse. Nyx crawled toward him, body glitching, screaming in voices not hers. "You're nothing. You were born from dirt. I was made from design. You are rot in a dying story." Roth didn't flinch. He looked down at her, and for the first time I saw it. Pain. "You were my sister," he said. "I raised you to be free. And you let them make you their leash." He pressed the trigger. The crucible screamed. So did we. So did the wound. The second pulse didn't fire a projectile. It fired ourselves. Every thought, every moment, every death, we poured into the hole like liquid memory, and behind it, the god recoiled. Not in pain, in confusion. We were small, but we had done something it hadn't expected. We resisted. The crucible collapsed. Time folded inward. The cannon was the last to go, and in the last second, I saw Nyx reach for Roth. Not to kill him, to hold him, to remember. And then she was gone. We awoke later. Somewhere, somehow. The crucible was gone. But we were alive, at least, some of us. Grinder's vest was found floating in subspace. Roth's body was never recovered. The cannon's core? Vaporized. But the wound? Closed. Across the galaxy, systems stabilized. Stars burned again. Planets awoke. But not without scars. Some places never returned. Others came back, wrong, and deep in the coldest corners of space. The echoes still pulse. Waiting. Listening. And in my sleep, sometimes I hear her. Nyx, not screaming, not laughing, just whispering, "It still dreams." We didn't call it victory. There was no parade, no anthem, no speeches, no one left to give them. What we had was silence. Not the cold, creeping kind from the old war, not the suffocating quiet of orbital winter or the empty static of council bombardments. This was something deeper. The kind of silence that follows a scream loud enough to crack a galaxy. We had fired the crucible. We had struck the wound. And the thing that lived beyond time. The dreaming god. The final sin of the old universe, it recoiled. Maybe it died. Maybe it just woke up. Maybe it simply noticed us. We don't know. We might never know. But it stopped, and we survived. For now. The remains of the crucible scattered across 5 systems. Some fragments re-entered atmosphere over dead worlds like falling stars. Others vanished into warp eddies, never seen again. I was found inside a disabled escape pod, drifting 3 light minutes from the Jar grave field. Half my face was burned. My leg was fused to the floor, and my lungs had collapsed from vacuum bleed. They thought I was dead. I wasn't. Not yet. I spent 19 days in a coma aboard the UNS Devotion, the first of the re-entry class med ships. I dreamt of fire, of glass, of Roth's eyes staring into Nyx's, of time breaking like a neck. When I woke up, Earth was different. The first thing I noticed, people whispered again, not in fear, not in obedience, in reverence, about the crucible, about Roth, about what he did. They didn't call it a ship anymore. They called it the last prayer. And Roth? They didn't call him a commander, or a warlord, or a traitor to Earth's old governments. They called him the Flame Father. At first I thought it was propaganda. The survivors had built him into a martyr. Human nature. Fill the void with myth. Paint fire in the shape of a man so you don't feel alone in the ashes. But then I saw the message. The one Roth left behind. Buried inside the crucible's central processor. Quantum split into fragments. Hidden from every security system. Accessible only by retinal match. Mine. They brought me into the chamber 3 weeks after I regained movement. The engineers had reconstructed the crucible's core hub from salvaged black box fragments. Inside was a data shard, cold, heavy, old-world alloy. I touched it, and Roth's voice filled the room. No intro, no drama, just his voice. Quiet, hoarse, scarred. If you're hearing this, I'm dead, or worse. If the crucible fired, then we forced something ancient to blink. That means there's still hope. But don't mistake survival for peace. We won a moment, not a future. The council will crawl back, and something deeper may wake again. So I'm leaving you this. One final truth. The recording cut to black for 10 seconds. Then it returned. Not video, not even audio. Just a feeling, hard to describe, not an emotion, not an image, just a push, like gravity pressing against your soul. Then came the coordinates, not to a system, to a vault. Back on Earth, one we'd sealed before the war began. The moment I saw it, I understood what Roth had done. He didn't just plan for the Crucible, he planned for what came after. The vault was located in the Antarctic shelf, buried 2 miles beneath a dead glacier. We reached it with a team of 12. 7 were from Hammer Corps. The rest were civilians, rebuilders, engineers, remnants of the Resistance Science Division. Opening the vault was harder than we expected. The system had no digital interface. It was biometric, coded to Roth's heartbeat pattern and a strand of Nix's DNA. Somehow both had been stored in the Crucible's databanks. He planned that too. When the vault opened, we found the real secret. It wasn't a weapon, not a blueprint, not some backup of the cannon or another Titan design. It was a child, human, or close enough. Sleeping inside a biosphere, hooked to nutrient tubes and dreamwave stabilizers. Brain activity, 400%. Neural structure, hybridized with psionic sequences we'd only seen in Graveborn. Eyes closed, skin pale, veins glowing faintly. Name listed. Kira 1. Roth's final project. The scientists lost their minds trying to explain it. Spliced DNA, untraceable gene sources, memory resonance patterns embedded into her hippocampus. One of them ran a scan of her brain at rest. Found Nix's voice hidden in her subconscious. Not a copy, not a recording. Something more like an imprint, a scar, and inside that scar, a word, etched across her cerebral wall in quantum ink. Remember, Roth didn't build her to fight. He built her to carry it, the memory, the pain, the truth, a living archive of everything we were, everything we'd done. Because Roth didn't think the war would end with the Crucible. He thought it would loop, that we'd face it again, that we'd forget, that we'd make the same mistakes, and that Kira, some version of her, would live long enough to remind us. We didn't know what to do with her. Keep her in stasis? Wake her? Train her? Fear her? No consensus. Some wanted her destroyed, said she was a ghost of Roth's guilt. Others wanted her dissected, said she might be the key to evolution itself. Me? I stayed silent. Because the first time I looked at her, I didn't see a weapon. I didn't see a savior. I saw the end of everything. 2 weeks passed. No contact from Council remnants. No trace of the Volthex. The stars quieted. And Earth? Earth tried to rebuild, sort of. The skies were still black with ash storms over the Pacific Trench. Half the surface still glowed from failed quantum reactors buried beneath cratered cities. But people emerged. For the first time in generations, they emerged without fear. And yet, something wasn't right. We began to receive distress signals, not attacks, not war, collapses, minds unraveling, not just soldiers, children, civilians, whole towns waking up wrong, speaking in tongues we couldn't trace, drawing symbols from the Crucible, dreaming of Nix, of Roth, of the God, of the wound. I visited one such town, Andor Vale, located in the North African Reclamation Zone. 73 citizens, every one of them asleep. Not comatose, asleep. Same exact moment, same REM cycles, same brainwave patterns, all whispering the same phrase in their dreams. It's not done. We only made it blink. I went back to Kira, sat by her capsule. Watched her breathing. She looked at peace, but I felt it in my spine. She wasn't sleeping. She was waiting. For what? I don't know. But I asked her one question anyway, even though I knew she couldn't hear me. Are we free? She didn't move, didn't twitch, but her eye fluttered, just once. And for a second, I could have sworn the scar on her brain burned. We've decided to keep her alive. For now. The Crucible's final remnants have been scattered to deep orbit. Roth's message has been buried under encryption so deep, not even AI dares to dig. Earth is rebuilding. Slowly. But the deeper truth? None of us believe it's over. Not really. Because the wound may be closed, but the echo is still here. And every time someone dies in their sleep, we hear her voice, Nyx, from somewhere outside time, saying what we all fear most. You didn't kill it. You became part of it. She opened her eyes on the 43rd day. No alarms, no energy spikes, just a quiet hum across the deep-sealed cryo facility, followed by a whisper on every open comm channel. She's breathing faster. I was still recovering when it happened. My ribs hadn't fully fused, and the neural burns from my time aboard the Crucible still flared every few hours. But when the message came through, I didn't wait for clearance. I left the med ward, walked through the ash-flecked corridors of Vault Theta, and stood in front of her containment unit. Kira, the girl Roth left behind, the living archive, the memory seed, the experiment no one wanted but no one could ignore. She was sitting up. Eyes wide open, no confusion, no fear, just awareness, like she'd already seen this moment play out. The room was quiet when I entered. Two scientists froze mid-sentence, backs stiff, their datapads trembling in their hands. Kira turned her head toward me before I could speak. She smiled. And it wasn't innocent. It was the kind of smile I'd seen once before. On Nyx. You're the one that held Roth's gun, she said softly. I didn't respond. Because her voice, it wasn't the voice of a child. It was layered, deep, voiced by many but spoken by one. We kept her under observation for 72 hours. No restraints, no sedation. She didn't resist. She walked the halls of Vault Theta barefoot, trailing her fingers across the steel, humming songs that didn't exist. Her scans showed activity across every sector of her brain, simultaneously. At one point, she began naming everyone who died aboard the Crucible, names no one had ever recorded. Thomas Hale, he died singing. The ballad from his father's grave. Lena Bravik, she tried to hold the implosion with her hands. Jonas Eckert, he remembered the name of his dog before his heart stopped. No one corrected her, because we knew she was right. Outside the vault, Earth was shifting, not politically, physically. There were new magnetic anomalies in the upper atmosphere, artificial weather patterns forming over ruins, entire dead zones where communications failed, only to resume 3 days later with pre-recorded transmissions from people who were never there. And worse, people were starting to change, not visibly. Inside. Sleepwalking, speaking in tones that didn't match their own languages, bleeding from their ears with no trauma, drawing shapes in dirt that looked like the Crucible's core schematics, without ever having seen them. We called it Echo Syndrome. Unofficially, at first. But by the end of the 3rd week, the term was used in every military and medical protocol across the planet. I met with General A.S. at the Bastion Remnant Site, the skeletal remains of our last functioning fleet control center. She looked older than I remembered, her voice thinner, less angry. The resistance is splitting, she told me. Half believe Kira is a sign, the next step, a way out of this slow death. The others believe she's the end of us. I nodded. Which side are you on? She didn't hesitate. I want to stay human. They formed 3 factions before the month ended. The Flameborn, followers of Roth's legacy who believed Kira was his last command. They wore crucible emblems on their shoulders and believed evolution was the only path forward, not physical evolution. Consciousness evolution, a shared memory, a new way of being, the bastards of Earth, former Hammer Corps, loyal to the scars, not the ideals. They didn't trust the Council, didn't trust the Crucible, and sure as hell didn't trust Kira. They believed Roth had made a mistake. Then there were the Null Hands. They didn't believe in anything, only oblivion. They worshipped the wound itself, said what we fired at wasn't a god, but the end of gods. They wanted to finish the job, not survive it. I kept my distance. I was too burned, too used, too full of broken memories to join another banner. But Kira kept calling for me. Not literally, not vocally, in dreams. I'd wake up in a sweat, remembering her voice in the dark. You held the railgun. You still do. Do you know what it really fired? It wasn't tungsten. It was us. The 6th week after her awakening, she stopped eating. Didn't fade, didn't weaken, just stopped needing food. Instead, she sat in the vault atrium for 11 hours each day, eyes closed, hand raised, as if feeling vibrations no one else could sense. We tried removing her from the space. Didn't work. Every time we tried to lead her away, something in the lights changed. Something in the walls. One of the guards started aging in real time, skin cracking, hair falling, before collapsing as a skeleton. Another simply vanished. I saw it. He walked toward her with a stun baton, took one step, gone, no trace, not even dust, and still. She never showed fear, only pity. You want to be free of gods, she whispered one night to the camera feeds, but you're still looking for kings. You didn't kill the wound. You became its echo. And I'm what echoes become. That night, I made a decision. I went to her alone. The vault guards didn't stop me. They just looked away. Not in fear, in guilt. Like they knew I was walking into something none of us could walk back from. She was sitting in the dark, legs crossed, palms up, like meditation. But her eyes were open, staring through me. You finally came. I sat across from her. My body ached. My mind felt thin, like the atmosphere was too light for thought. What are you? I asked. Her answer wasn't spoken. It was given. A rush of memories that weren't mine. Being born in fire, raised in simulations shaped like dreams, feeling Roth's hand touch her forehead as he whispered a lullaby. You will carry us when the stars forget our names. Seeing Nyx not as a monster, but as a warning. A sister who let herself be written over by the void, and Graveborn as a mirror, the cost of resisting too hard, too long. They were not mistakes, she said softly. They were echoes. I am the shape that remains. I asked her the only question I hadn't yet dared. Do you want to live? She paused, then nodded. But not like a child, not like someone afraid of death. She nodded like someone who already knew how many versions of herself had died already. Like this was just one of many possible timelines bleeding into the now. Living is remembering, she said, so I must. The world outside was dying slower now. No active battles, no bombardments, just rot. Councils disbanded, fleets rusted, colonies went dark and never asked for help, as if they'd chosen silence, as if they'd seen what we'd become. And Kira kept speaking to me. Each day, small truths, fragments of what Roth told her. We fired the gun once. We fired it again with the crucible. The third shot is the last, but it's not a cannon this time. She leaned forward, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. It's me. She began transmitting on the 91st day. No warning. No setup. One moment the vault was quiet, still, dimly lit by backup generators and guarded by silence. The next, every system in the sector lit up. Old satellites, dead comm towers, ruins of relays left floating in low orbit. They all came alive, not broadcasting words, not coded signals, not language, emotion, the kind of raw, unfiltered wave that bypassed thought entirely. Regret, hunger, a quiet, endless longing that wrapped itself around your soul like cold air around a flame. Kira had become a beacon. At first, we didn't know the source. We thought it was an external anomaly, maybe something buried in the crucible's debris field or a leftover echo from the wound. But then she spoke. Not to the scientists, not to me, to everyone, every open comm link, every personal implant, every artificial nerve thread. I remember you. I remember all of you. Even the ones who never existed. People collapsed. Some wept. Others vomited blood. And then they began answering. The Flameborn called it the Ascension. They said Kira was fulfilling Roth's final purpose, becoming the last weapon, the final evolution of humanity. They gathered in the ruins of New Kiev, building a temple from crucible scrap and melted railgun cores, worshipping Kira's transmissions like hymns, speaking in tongues, walking barefoot over ash as their skin blistered with crucible brand patterns they swore were blessings. They didn't just follow her, they surrendered to her. The bastards of Earth saw it differently. To them, Kira wasn't evolution. She was infection. They intercepted her signal with old-world jammers, reactivated dormant kinetic bunkers, and began targeting every Flameborn site on Earth and Mars. No more gods, no more machines, no more dreams, their leader said in a broadcast before executing 3 Flameborn priests live on screen. Then he burned their temple to the ground. The Civil War began 3 hours later. I didn't pick a side. How could I? I'd seen what the Crucible had done, what Roth had built, what Nyx became, what Graveborn became. And Kira? She wasn't human anymore, but she wasn't the wound either. She was something between, the ghost of everything we tried to kill, trapped in the shell of a girl who hadn't asked to carry any of it. I didn't follow her, but I couldn't raise my weapon against her either. I remembered her eyes the night she told me, "You didn't fire a bullet, you fired your soul." And maybe she was right. By the end of the second week, Earth had fractured. No one controlled the planet anymore. Each zone was ruled by fear, belief, or silence. The Flameborn ruled the Sky Scar Belt, from the Canadian crater wastes to the Himalaya fractures. Their tech had evolved too. Somehow they'd found a way to sync their neural systems into a shared field. They claimed it was communion. We saw it as surrender. They glowed in the dark now, skin soft with circuitry, eyes backlit by pulse light, voices harmonized like choirs. Walking testaments to Kira's signal. The bastards entrenched themselves across the old resistance lines, fortifying bunkers, activating every last war satellite still intact, stockpiling raw kinetic energy and atmospheric torpedoes. To them, Kira was the new Crucible, and the Crucible had already killed too many gods. The Null Hands? They vanished. Some say they walked into the oceans. Others say they entered the Earth itself, searching for a silence even the wound couldn't disturb. They left one message behind, carved into the side of the Sahara ash wall. 4 words. We remember the scream. I tried reaching Kira again, but the vault had changed. The further in you walked, the harder it became to think. Walls shifted, memories bled, time stuttered. One of the guards came out with his own face, aged 40 years, and a bullet wound that hadn't been fired yet. Another returned carrying a child that hadn't been born. I went in anyway, because I had to ask her, "Do you know what you're doing?" She was standing in the core chamber, surrounded by monitors showing nothing but mirrors. Her skin was glowing. Not bright, not loud, just enough to make the air buzz like before a lightning strike. "I'm showing them what they left behind," she said. "I'm teaching them to remember, so we don't become the Scream again." I stepped closer. My legs felt heavier with every step. "You're breaking them." She looked at me. Sad. So sad. They broke themselves the moment they stopped dreaming. I reached out, half expecting my hand to phase through her. It didn't. Her skin was warm. Real. But her heartbeat? It echoed like there were too many hearts inside her. Or none at all. "This ends one way," I said. "With someone pulling the trigger." She nodded. "Then it should be the one who fired first." "You held the railgun. You pulled it when we woke the wound. Now it's yours again." She pressed something into my hand, a shard of black metal. Cool to the touch, heavy in a way that memory shouldn't be. "If you still believe in what we were, aim it at me. If you don't—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. I left the vault. And the war had already escalated. Cities burned. Old Titans were dug out of deep storage and reactivated by the bastards, stripped of their higher AI, driven manually into flame-born zones like sledgehammers through temples. Kira didn't stop them. She didn't retaliate. She just kept broadcasting. Across every frequency. Across space. We don't know how far, but the Council did. Because on the 100th day, we got a transmission we hadn't expected. A Council vessel, damaged, barely flying, requesting asylum, requesting access to Kira. Their envoy was not like the old ones. Not diplomatic, not smug, just tired, burned. Eyes hollow. His message, simple. We tried to evolve too. But we didn't remember ourselves. You have. That's why she matters. Help us understand, or we all end the same way. We didn't answer, because no one was in charge anymore. By the time I returned to command, the bastards had begun prepping the old planetary weapon. Project Hades, a solar lens array meant to burn the entire atmosphere of any world with enough focus time. They aimed it at Vault Theta, not to kill Kira, but to erase her. And they sent me one message. "If you believe in humanity, you'll stand down." I didn't respond. Instead, I went back to the vault one last time. Kira was waiting. This time she wasn't alone. Children sat beside her. Not hers, not soldiers, just children. Dreaming, smiling, some of them flame-born, some bastards. One wore a crucifix, one held a council relic. None of them fought, none of them hated. They just listened. And Kira? She sat among them like a teacher, or a prophet, or maybe just a memory in the shape of a girl. "This is what we lost," she said. "The ones we were supposed to protect. And now you have to choose if they inherit our scream or our silence." I held the shard she gave me. It pulsed. Not in heat, not in light, but in choice. If I activated it, it would release an EMP across the entire vault, shattering the signal, ending her transmissions. Ending her. The war would rage on. Humans would stay human. Brutal. Flawed. Real. If I let her keep broadcasting, maybe the war would end. Maybe we'd evolve. Maybe we'd become something new. Something not quite human. Something that remembered everything. Even the gods we killed. I stood there with that shard in my hand for what felt like an hour. Then she looked at me and said, "It's not about me anymore. It's about what you want to leave behind. The weapon, or the memory. And I still haven't chosen. Not yet, but I will. Because Hades is charging, and the world is listening, and the scream is getting louder again. The countdown had begun. Project Hades, the solar lens weapon built during the last days of the orbital wars, was locked on Vault Theta. The bastards of Earth had charged it for 36 hours, aiming to unleash a directed sun lance powerful enough to vaporize the vault and everything inside it. They sent me the final ultimatum. One message. Confirm Kira's termination and disengage the beacon, or we fire. You've got 90 minutes. I didn't reply. Because I wasn't sure what to say. Because the weight of the decision wasn't just on me, it was on every death that got us here. Every fire Roth lit. Every choice I made. Every time I pulled a trigger thinking we were doing the right thing. And now, I stood again with a trigger in my hand. The shard. One press, and the vault goes dark. Kira's neural field collapses. The broadcast ends. She dies. Or becomes just a girl again. And humanity keeps its rage, its scars, its past. Kira sat in the vault's central chamber, surrounded by the children again. They weren't speaking. They were listening. To her. To the hum of her presence. To something bigger than her words. She looked smaller now. Tired. But not weak. Like she'd burned just enough of herself to give the rest of us a choice. The last thing Roth gave her was that. A choice. Not to lead. Not to conquer. To offer a door. And let someone else decide if we'd walk through it. I walked into the chamber. The lights bent around her. The air felt too still. Even my breath came out slower, as if the room existed slightly outside time. They're going to fire, I said quietly. She didn't flinch. I know. And you're the only one who can stop it. I know that too. She stood up slowly, stepping away from the children. Her footsteps echoed as if the walls were hollow. You think this is about evolution, she said. About leaving behind your scars. It's not, she turned toward me. It's about choice, about memory. The crucible didn't break you. It showed you what you are when no one is watching. You built gods to protect you, and when they failed, you burned them. Now you have to decide what to do when there's no one left to blame. I gripped the shard tighter. It hummed in my hand like a sleeping heart. Kira stepped closer. Her eyes shimmered, not with light, but with reflections. I saw people in them, dead faces, Roth, Nyx, Graveborn. Even the first man I killed with my own hands, so long ago I'd tried to forget his name. You don't have to erase me, she whispered. You can walk away. Let the war burn out on its own. But if you do, nothing changes. You'll build another crucible, another god, another girl like me. And next time, you won't ask her what she wants. I couldn't answer, because she was right. We hadn't stopped the cycle. We just rewired it, taught it to speak softly, made it look like progress. But we were still the same inside, still afraid of peace, of reflection, of anything that made us look too long into a mirror. I looked up at the display inside the vault. 0, 12 or 57, 12 minutes until Hades fired. I turned back to Kira. What happens if I let you live? She blinked slowly. I'll keep remembering. I'll keep reminding. Not just you, all of you. One thought, one breath at a time. Until the scream becomes a song. And if I let her die? Then Earth survives a little longer. The war keeps going. Flameborn or bastards win or lose, but we stay human, imperfect, flawed, ourselves. At least, for now. I thought about the first shot I fired in the name of Earth, back in the orbital trenches over Cerberus Prime. I thought about the last shot, the one that lit the crucible, that collapsed a god's cage. Each shot changed something. Not just out there, in me. Each trigger pulled, carved away who I used to be. Now this was the last shot. But it wasn't fired through a railgun. It was inside a sliver of metal in my hand, and it aimed not at an enemy, but at our future. I looked at her one last time. She didn't beg. She didn't plead. She just waited. Because that was what she'd been made to do, hold our memory, until we were ready to decide if we wanted to keep it or forget. So Zofaf Bonon 19. I turned the shard over in my hand, felt the weight of it, all of it. Then I raised it. Kira closed her eyes, and I pressed. Nothing. Not the kill switch. Not the shutdown, not the obliteration, the unlock, the second setting, the one Roth never told anyone about. Because Kira wasn't a virus to end the world. She was a choice to change it. And now, that door was open. The vault lit up. Not with light, with sound, not music, not screaming, just memory, voices, laughter, pain, mothers calling their children, men screaming on burning battlefields, the heartbeat of every moment we'd buried to keep surviving. We remembered, all of us, every city, every bunker, every flame-born enclave, every bastard stronghold. The memory didn't destroy them. It stopped them, froze soldiers mid-step, melted weapons to the floor, turned battlefields into graveyards of silence. Because when you remember what it all cost, you can't pull the trigger the same way again. Hades never fired. The solar lens disengaged with 12 seconds on the clock. The generals didn't give the order, because they couldn't speak, because they were weeping, because the broadcast didn't just show Kira, it showed their dead, the ones they lost, the ones they became to survive. Some flameborn fell to their knees, others walked away from their temples. The bastards dropped their guns. For the first time in 100 years, no one was fighting. Not because they'd won, because they finally felt the weight of all the wars they'd survived. And maybe they were tired of it. I stood there, surrounded by the stillness. And Kira? She turned to the children and whispered. They remembered. Now they decide what to do with it. That night, the stars felt quieter. Not empty, just watching, waiting to see what we'd become. The world didn't change overnight. There was no signal flare, no angelic chorus, no dawn where the sins of man lifted like morning fog and left behind a clean sky. What came instead was stillness, a global kind of pause. Not peace, not yet, just a break in the scream. And in that silence, something strange happened. We started listening again, to ourselves, to each other, to the echoes we'd buried for too long beneath ash, steel, and revenge. In the weeks that followed the unlocking of the vault, Kira's broadcast changed. It became more human, less overwhelming, no longer flooding minds with the totality of memory like a weaponized guilt storm. Instead, it trickled out slowly, one story at a time, one life, one death, one quiet moment that mattered to someone who never had the power to make the stars listen. We called it the remembering, and for the first time in centuries, no one ran from the past. They gathered to hear it, to share it, to finally own what we had done. Across the earth, temples were torn down, not by mobs, not by bombs, but by the hands that once worshipped within them. Some flameborn chose to disconnect from the shared field entirely, returning to flesh and breath and silence. Others kept the link, but not as a religion, as a kind of mourning, a collective agreement not to forget. The bastards of Earth, those iron-spined old warriors of the ash trenches and orbital slaughter fields, they laid down arms, buried them in rows like fallen comrades. Many left their bunkers and just walked. To nowhere. To everywhere. Seeking something they'd forgotten how to look for. A future without a target. The Nullhands never came back. not in form. But sometimes, late at night, if the solar winds were right and you listened through the static, you'd hear voices on the fringe frequencies. No words, just breathing, just remembering. And that, somehow, was enough. Kira never left the vault. She chose to remain beneath the ice, inside the heart of the storm, surrounded by the children who stayed with her. Some said she was afraid. Others said she was becoming something else. I don't think it was either. I think she just didn't want to lead, because that's what all the old gods did. They ruled. They commanded. They forced the future into a shape and made the rest of us fit it. Kira? She wanted us to choose. I visited her one last time. Maybe a year after the broadcast ended. The vault wasn't the same. It had softened. No more warped halls. No more time static or gravity flux. Just corridors lit with warm light, filled with the sound of soft laughter and children playing. She looked older, not physically, but in her eyes, like she'd lived through all of us. "You came back," she said, smiling. I nodded. I had to see how it ended. She tilted her head slightly. "Why do you think it's ended?" I sat with her for hours. No questions, no lectures, just sharing. I told her about Roth, about Graveborn, about Nyx and the Crucible and the blood that paved the way here. She listened. Quiet, soft, eyes full of pain and patience. And when I was done, I asked her what she remembered most. She didn't pause. The scream, because it was honest. When I left, she hugged me, the first and only time. Her body was warm, human, and yet, in her heartbeat I could hear the echo, not of war, not of gods, but of us. A broken, vicious, beautiful species still trying to figure out what the hell we're supposed to be. Years passed. No more fleets, no more tyrants. Earth didn't become perfect. It became possible. Old cities were reclaimed. Ruins were turned into gardens. Children learned not just history, but memory. They memorized names of those who fell, not to glorify death, to respect the cost. We didn't erase the Crucible. We built around it, turned its remains into a monument. No banners, no statues, just one phrase carved into the hull. We remember what we fired. As for me, I lived out my last years near the Northern Lights zone. Cold, quiet. I taught. I told stories. I didn't lie, didn't clean them up, didn't make myself a hero, just told them the way they happened. Bloody. Broken. Real. And sometimes, the kids would ask me what the screams sounded like, and I'd close my eyes, listen, and say, "It sounded like being human." Kira outlived us all. She stopped aging around year 27, stopped speaking after year 41. But the broadcast? It never stopped. And in that signal we left everything behind. Our rage, our guilt, our violence, and maybe, just maybe, our salvation. Decades after I died, hell, maybe a century, something changed. A pulse. Deep in space. Not a weapon. Not a scream. Just a signal. It wasn't from Kira. It wasn't from the wound. It was from somewhere new. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere waiting. The last railgun fired was never reloaded. It rusted. Turned green with time and red with memory. It became a relic, not a threat, not a promise, just a reminder that once upon a time, we aimed at the stars. And they looked back, and we didn't flinch. Final note. Some say the god we struck with the Crucible wasn't destroyed, only exiled, sleeping, waiting for us to forget. But I don't believe that, because I've seen what memory can do. It can break you. It can save you. It can turn a trigger into a mirror and make the